Welcome to our show, Growing Minds. I'm very pleased to welcome to another episode where you are going to learn, discover, and explore many of the things that you as a parent or as a Sunday school servant or as a priest are wondering, how can I deal with my kids or my students? This program was really thought of because we are getting, as CYC, many questions. How do I deal with this issue? What do I do when my son does that? And we thought to put this together, and I was very pleased to have a faculty of minds that really participated and gave their minds, their experience, and time. I had Sylvia Farag, Adli Youssef, Nina Merham, Christine Agaibi, and today I'm very pleased to have Sylvia Zaki, a master's degree in speech pathology, and she's a speech therapist. Sylvia has been serving as a speech therapist for many years, not just working, but rather serving. And there is a huge difference because she has the heart of service. She cares about the children and their parents. She understands what goes through in every family when they are actually suffering from an issue like autism or a spectrum disorder. This is a topic that sometimes is considered a taboo, and many people do not like to speak about. And unfortunately, while schools may have resources, not every family understands what are their rights or even what are the resources available. So I would like you to keep a very clear attention. At the end of her lecture, she will offer you a QR code for which, if you scan, you will be able to answer a simple question for us to learn that you have attended the lecture and you can be offered a certificate at the end. With that, I welcome Sylvia Zaki, a colleague, a co-servant, and a daughter. Happy to have you today, Sylvia.
Hi, Uncle. Thank you so much for those kind words. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As Dr. Haney just told us about, just introduced, today I will be talking to you about autism spectrum disorder. I know this can be a tough topic, so I want you guys to please forgive me if I say anything that might be offensive to you or you're not used to hearing. I really mean with all my heart for us to learn together about what this disorder is, how we can help this population, and how we can grow together as a community and bring everybody together. So please bear with me. There's going to be a few technical terms for us to work through here. So just as a reminder, please do not forget to scan that QR code that you see on the screen. Just bring your questions so I can answer them as they come along. So let's review just a little bit about what a speech pathologist is, which is my job. A speech pathologist is a person trained to work with breakdowns in language, so cognitive skills, speech, motor skills, social skills, and feeding skills. This can apply to developmental or acquired conditions, and we work with everybody across the lifespan, both newborns all the way up to geriatric. I work in a clinic that treats children from ages 0 to 5, so I'm mainly working in that early stage developmental part. So I do work a large population of people with autism and their families. So let's dive right in. What is autism? The big scary word that everyone kind of hears about a lot, but doesn't really know what to do with. It's the acronym for it is ASD, which stands for Autism Spectrum Disorder. And we'll talk a little bit about why it's called that, because it used to have many different names, but now it's called just this one topic, one word, Autism Spectrum Disorder. It's a diverse neurodevelopmental disorder, and it is characterized by difficulties in 3 main categories of difficulty. So repetitive behaviors, difficulties with social interaction, so social use of language, and communication. It presents in many, many different ways, In children, it can look in early life, it can look like a difficulty with babble, so start beginning sounds, or pointing or making eye contact. So those early signs we see in babies, maybe 0 to maybe 18 months or 2 years, we should see all those behaviors emerge, but in a child with autism, they might not. Perhaps as they get a little bit older, they're having difficulty responding to their name, not because they don't know it, but because they just aren't responding. And some parents might see a loss of language or social skills that they used to have. So I get a lot of parents that tell me they used to be able to say these words, but now they cannot, or they used to be able to do this or play like this, but now they don't. So we see that sometimes in people with autism. So it can look like a lot of different difficulties. It can also look like difficulty responding to different sensory input. This is a huge kind of bracket of information that we're going to talk about a little bit later, but sensory input meaning all the things in the world that are entering their minds that they have to process, difficulty with that. So difficulty with hearing, or different lights, or different tastes and smells. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth. So those sensory needs, that processing that sensory input, it becomes very, very difficult. You'll see some unusual movements like rocking or twirling or spinning, flapping their arms. We also see a lot of difficulty playing or interacting with peers. So a lot of people say that children with autism like to play by themselves, or they're content to sit alone and play by themselves. We do see a lot of like isolation, self-isolation, but I assure you they're not content or happy to be by themselves. They just have difficulty entering into any kind of social circle or interaction with a peer or a sibling, or an adult. As they get a little bit older, they'll have difficulty talking about their feelings. They'll have difficulty explaining using emotional language. I feel happy, I feel sad, because those things are difficult to articulate for them. They might have a difficulty understanding tone of voice, body language, and gestures. These are the social things that you and I will typically respond to very quickly, whether someone's frowning or someone's crying. A child with autism might not understand that. Even tone of voice. They might not understand you calling their name in a happy tone versus an angry tone. They might not be able to pick up on both of those qualities, and therefore be unable to respond. And even if they do understand that there's a difference, they might not know what the difference is, and they might not be able to respond in kind. So they also have some interests that they are particularly obsessed with or really interested in, and they have difficulty talking about anything else. So sometimes common interests include like trains or vehicles. Some children like animals or bugs. The interests are very variable, but they sometimes will have one interest that they are able to talk about for a long time. And they have a lot of difficulty breaking from routine. Now, just to focus on this difficulty breaking from routine, this means change. We all know that life means change every single day. Things are new, things are different, problems come up, and you and I are able to very easily try to problem solve as best we can. A child with autism relies on routine because they have difficulty, or they might have difficulty with that problem solving piece. So things that are the same are safe. Things that are different are new and scary. And so I don't know what to do if we made a right turn instead of a left turn. And I don't have the strategies to be able to come up with a new plan as part of executive function, which we talked about last time, and we can continue to touch on this time as well. So that difficulty breaking from routine is not always a comfortable thing, but it's a safety thing. So I want us also to keep that in mind. So using this graphic, we see here that autism is summarized in these categories of difficulty, motor difficulties, and this does not necessarily mean a difficulty moving your body, although often it does. This can also mean difficulty moving your mouth, your tongue, your lips, and your voice in order to speak. So some people have difficulty with motor planning in that way. Communication difficulties at the cognitive level. So creating or pulling that language in order to be able to get your message across, and understand the messages that are coming to you. This might become difficult because I don't know how to put the words together, or I don't know which words are appropriate for this situation. There are social impediments. I don't know how to use the language to socially connect with other people. So I don't know how I might have difficulty expressing love or kindness in words rather than in action. A lot of children with autism are very affectionate, but they just might not have those social pieces to be able to enter a conversation or be able to manage a friendship so easily. They'll need a lot of support to do that. Not that they cannot, they just need a lot of support. And again, that sensitivity to change and to stimulation. So if suddenly there are too many loud sounds or competing sounds, then they are not able to process that or handle that, and it becomes very distressing. And those repetitive behaviors as well. We're going to talk about the reason for these repetitive behaviors because they're very much connected to their sensory integration skills and processing skills. So I'll explain a little bit more about what that means. But these are the main categories here. And again, they affect the three things we talked about: the behavioral behavior, social communication, and social functioning. A lot of different terms here. They're all coming together to affect these three main categories. So that's what we see. So then somebody will come and diagnose in these categories. They'll test these categories to find what comes together to be the diagnosis. So looking at my notes here. How is autism spectrum disorder diagnosed? In order to do so, a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a neuropsychologist will come together, a developmental psych or a neuropsych will complete the evaluation. The evaluation should be a process or a series of visits, maybe 4 visits over the course of time, in order to observe the child in a specific context or in multiple contexts, observe interactions with the child between the parents or between the child and a stranger, an adult, the evaluator. A lot of patient interviews, so interacting directly with the child, and a lot of parent interviews. So they're collecting information from parents, from teachers, over time. So they're asking about since the child's birth, and they're asking about how do they act at home, how do they act at school. Compiling all this information, they use assessments like questionnaires, they're official assessments, and they use informal clinical opinion. They have tests for cognitive skills, they have tests for language abilities, and they have medical testing to rule out other conditions. So if it's not explained by any other condition, then it might not be autism. So because autism spectrum covers so many different skills, it might be that a child might have difficulty in one area, but not the other areas. But it might look behaviorally as the same thing. For example, if a child has difficulty with sensory integration, for example, they don't like loud sounds or they have difficulty with bright lights, you might see that behavior of, for example, stereotypically covering their ears. Does this necessarily mean that they have autism? No. But it does mean they have an auditory sensitivity or difficulty processing auditory stimuli. What this means for us is that we have to delve deeper into what does this child actually have difficulty with across environments, with different people, with adults, and with peers their own age, and see, can we put together a diagnosis that makes sense here? So some psychologists might be a little quick to diagnose autism. I have spoken with families who receive a diagnosis after one session. I encourage you, if this is the case with your family, that you continue to seek another opinion, and you seek sort of this holistic approach to diagnosis, instead of taking one session's word for it, because it is a complex diagnosis. So additionally, I have some questions here. How do I find an autism specialist? Do they have to be psychiatrists? Now, a child with difficulty is going to meet a lot of professionals in their lives. They're going to meet teachers and therapists and pediatricians, and those people might make recommendations based on what they observe from your child. So they might see some behaviors that are red flags for autism. As I said, those sensory behaviors. And so they might make the recommendation that you go visit a psychologist. A psychologist is the only person that can diagnose. And so a speech therapist might tell you, I see some red flags for autism. You might, I encourage you to visit a psychologist, and that is your choice whether or not to go to get a diagnosis. Then there's a whole process of how to get the child's help, which we'll talk about in a moment. So when we say autism spectrum, people often visualize this line from less autistic to more autistic. And it's a little bit more complex than that. So we talked about a lot of different behaviors or symptoms that we might see from autism, and they fall into these categories here that you see: language, executive functioning, sensory, perception, and motor. So it could be varying abilities in all of these like pie slices. So maybe a little bit of the language pie slice and a little bit of the sensory pie slice is missing or distorted, and so that child with autism has difficulty with those two things. Like it becomes sort of like a wave more than it becomes like a full pie circle. So it becomes a little bit more complex than saying, this is what the diagnosis looks like, this is how we treat it, this is, the pill that you can take. It's a little bit more complex because it turns out that every child with autism is different than the next one, and they need a treatment plan and they need services that are attuned or tailored to them rather than it all being one protocol. So this isn't to say that we won't be able to tell how like the skill level of a person with autism. Like we won't be able to see how much language he has, or we won't be able to know where he is or how well he's doing. We can always tell based on different assessments and observation and working with the child, but it is to say that each category varies a little bit. And with each cognitive stage, so as the child ages, it's going to vary a little bit because demands will increase as they get older. So what you expect from a 5-year-old, you don't expect from a 2-year-old. And what you expect from a 15-year-old, you don't expect from a 10-year-old. So as demands change, these abilities also begin to show themselves. So they may continue to improve, but they'll look a little bit different than you might expect. So in 2013, or before 2013, autism used to be its own diagnosis, and it used to be fragmented into other diagnoses. So like Asperger's used to be a diagnosis, pervasive developmental disorder used to be a diagnosis, and then in 2013, the American Psychological Association kind of put them all together into a spectrum and gave them these levels. So we'll go through each level and what each one kind of looks like. So with level 1, they require support. So all of them require support, but how much support? They require support because they have difficulty understanding and following social rules. So they might need specific instruction. They might appear uninterested in social interactions. They might have difficulty making friends, or difficulty with circle time, or difficulty hanging out with people in the classroom. They might not be able to follow all the rules. And they'll have difficulty switching between tasks, staying organized and with planning. So that's that executive function piece. So they'll have difficulty transitioning, like we were doing coloring, and now we're doing story time, and I don't know how to change my attention, my focus to do something else. So they may have difficulty with those transitions. And organizing, not just organizing like in terms of like their homework or their personal items, but organization in terms of language. So understanding like time, so before and after, or understanding first, second, last. Those things are also difficult, and so they don't understand before you go to the bathroom, you have to push in your chair. That's a difficult, complex task for them, and they might not be able to complete it. And then with planning, so knowing that I want to go to the bathroom, so I have to raise my hand and wait for the teacher to call on me, and then ask my question, and then wait for her to say yes, and then go to the bathroom. So all those steps I might not have in my mind, and so I don't know. What you see as an adult is that they're running to the bathroom, but what actually is happening is that they don't have the proper strategies or the support to be able to plan that interaction. With autism level 2, as we see here, they require substantial support. So not a reminder, not a some visual cues. No, they need somebody there to like really step in and help them. So they might have limited social interactions with high interest in specific topics. So they want to make friends, but they can only talk about their favorite animal. And so they don't know how to bridge the interest of their friend with their own interest. And so what results is they're isolated, or they can't, or some kids don't want to talk to them because all they talk about is their favorite animal, and they don't know how to respond. They might have difficulty with verbal and nonverbal communication. So these children might have something called echolalia, where they repeat a lot of things, or they do something called scripting, where they might repeat a part of a television show that they have connected to the situation, but you, as the outsider, don't understand. They might repeat questions back to you, or they might repeat commands that they usually hear. So when you say goodbye, they'll respond with say goodbye instead of just goodbye, which is what you expect. So they might be repeating language in that way because they don't know how to manage it and tailor it for the situation that they are in. You'll also see some repetitive and restrictive behaviors that are more frequent. So more frequent, maybe hand flapping or jumping or needing to run or spinning. A lot of different behaviors emerge, all different based on the child. And then we see here our most severe level, where they require substantial, very substantial support. So these are the people that are going to need, that might be completely non-speaking. They might have severe communication deficits. They might have a device, an electronic device that their speech therapists are working on using to talk. So they'll touch a few buttons, and then the iPad or the device will speak it out loud, and that's how they communicate. Also a very difficult process. It's not easier, and it's supposed to help expand their language, because for some reason they are having difficulty with the motor part of speech, but we don't want to take away their cognitive language, and we want to expand that, so we teach them how to use this device. Those children might also prefer solitary activities. Again, you'll see them try to isolate because they're more interested in something that they're doing, or their favorite toy or their favorite book, and they have trouble reintegrating into having connections with others. perhaps difficulty with attention or difficulty with processing. So all those things kind of come together. They may also find extreme distress with changing focus from one activity to another. So a child who is very focused on their toy ball, once you take it away, that becomes very distressing because now they had their safe item and now that item is gone and they don't know or they don't have as much awareness of their environment and they don't know what to do. So a lot of children with autism need their safety item or they need something to hold, or you need to work on, or we as therapists need to work on them expanding their attention, expanding their nonverbal communication so that they can relate to others and have reciprocal turns or communication turns, not necessarily verbal, but just relating to another person to ask for something or to play a game or to, share a laugh or something. So, some people with this disorder are very much able to succeed in traditional schools. They're able to hold jobs and they're able to perform functions of daily living with varying levels of support. It happens, and as you get older, autism doesn't remain the same. It becomes you learn ways to manage it. The child learns different skills. The child learns typical skills like logical reasoning and executive function. And then while they still might need support through the different stages of life, that support may vary. So maybe they started out requiring substantial support and now they just require support. So one of these questions is here that I have is, does autism get better? Is there any hope? Pardon me here. There absolutely is hope. Your child can learn new things, will absolutely learn new things, will learn different strategies. The parents have the job of trying to learn about autism and learning from the professionals that are giving you information and how they ask you to try interacting with the child, and learning about play therapy and all these strategies to like engage with the child at their level and pull the child from their motivation, enticing them to engage with you. So these are all things that many professionals out there are working on and have seen progress with. So this is not to say that that it always stays the same and it never goes away. It is a condition that we learn to live through, and things get better, and things get more difficult, and we manage it every step of the way. But can people with autism live very regular lives? Yes, they can. They absolutely can. A few more questions here, because they're relevant here. Is autism an inherited disability? Autism has a genetic component. That is what the research is showing. It does not show which gene, it just shows some genetic links. And it shows that if a parent has autism, then their child might also have autism. And there's still research being done on the environmental factors, but autism is not learned, it is developed. So it is not something that you can pick up from another child or that you can see another child doing. And so that child starts doing the same thing. That is not, it doesn't spread. There is a genetic component to it, and it is a developmental disorder. So moving on here, now there's another added element to the needs of a child with autism. They might have some difficulty with processing. I talked about processing last time I was here, and we talked about the differences between auditory, visual, and language processing. So to review, processing means digesting information. So if you're difficulty with auditory processing, then you have difficulty digesting spoken information, so spoken language. Visual is difficulty digesting visual information. Language is difficulty digesting organized language in general. When we talk about children with autism, we talk about sensory processing the most. Now, this is the domain of occupational therapists. This is not something that speech therapists work on. However, I am fortunate enough to be able to work very closely with occupational therapists, and we work together on the same team for the same children. And so I'm able to learn about this and share it with you in a way that I learned about it as a non-occupational therapist. So, we have 8 sensory systems in our body. We have the 5 regular ones that you hear about all the time, and then 3 that we don't think about but are very, very important. And all 8 systems help us every single day. Perhaps not always at the same time, but they're always working. So you have your visual sense, so things that you can see, obviously. You have your auditory sense, things you can hear. You have your gustatory sense, which is things that you can taste. You have your olfactory sense, which things that you can smell. You have your tactile sense, which is your sense of touch, and that occurs all over your body, not just your hands. And then you have your vestibular sensory system, and this system tells you or processes information about your body moving in space. So, do I have my leg lifted up? Do I have my head on the upside down? Do I have my arm in the air? Are my arms moving? Am I clapping? These are all things your vestibular system tells you about your body. You need to know if your body is moving and where it's moving. Now, your proprioception sensory system tells you where you are in space. So, am I sitting? Am I laying? Am I flying in the air? So if you've ever been to a theme park and you've gotten on a roller coaster and you see that the roller coaster climbs and then you drop, that drop in your stomach, that is your proprioceptive system like processing information right away because you were in one place in the air and suddenly you've fallen a few feet. And so your system is catching up with all the information that it's being given. And then that interoception is your ability to sense things in your body. So being able to sense that you're hungry, or that you're in pain, or that you're sore, and be able to locate the different feelings inside your body, or that you have a headache, being able to tell, is that headache up here in the front? Is it all the way in the back? Where is the pain? How bad is the pain? On how do you feel overall? So these are really, really important. So difficulty with sensory processing leads to different behaviors. So the child that covers their eyes because maybe it's too bright, or maybe the space is too big and there's too many things to look at. Or maybe there's not enough things to look at. So maybe we will look directly at the light. The child that covers their ears because things are too loud, or the child that screams because things are not loud enough. Children with gustatory difficulty with their gustatory system might react differently or with difficulty to different foods. They might not be able to handle the different texture in their mouth, and they might not be able to handle the different smells. And with children with tactile difficulties might like only a few clothes, and those are the only clothes they can wear because those are the clothes that don't itch, or they don't like the tag, or they're really afraid of touching new things because they don't know what they're going to encounter, and their body's not going to process it in a pleasant way. Think about that drop on the roller coaster. That's not always very pleasant, or at least I don't think it's pleasant. That child also, if they're tactily defensive, they might not like touch at all. They don't like tickles. They don't like hugs. They don't like you patting them. They're gonna squirm away from you. And it's not a reaction to not wanting affection. Their body just doesn't process the information very well. Then we do have other kiddos who love that. So it depends very much on the child. There's also the child that spins, that wants that vestibular input or likes to be flipped upside down. There's the child that crashes into a wall or into the bed because they need that proprioceptive input. They need the deep hugs that helps them process where they are. They know where their body is in space. Imagine you were just a floating head and you had no idea where your body was. You would not be able to function as well as you do now. And so a child with autism might be dealing with all of these difficulties or some of these difficulties and not be able to manage interactions at the same time. And so they create these behaviors until their sensory systems are in a balance. And once we reach the balance, once we reach regulation, that is when we can learn new things. But if the child is spinning and I'm trying to teach, that we're not going to learn until we have reached enough spins so for our system to be okay. Or the child that's too scared to do and movement things and they're very still, they might need to practice all these movements before they're able to like be okay and regulated. So again, all of these things occupational therapists work on. Occupational therapists also do work in schools and in clinics and in hospitals. And you would be looking for a pediatric occupational therapist with experience or with practice in sensory integration. Because again, occupational therapy is its own field and it's also very vast. So these are all things to keep in mind when we're trying to explain a child's behavior, not just writing it off as that child has autism and this is how they behave, where actually these behaviors change and grow and become more particular to that child as they develop. So that was a lot of information. What can I as a parent do? Now, I want to take a moment to say this is very stressful. This is a stressful situation because you see that your child has some sort of difficulty, but you're not sure what to do or how to help. I want us to take away this idea that parents cause autism. That has not scientifically been proven at all. It is not scientifically sound. It is not your fault that your child might have autism. You can only help. You can only help by doing as you see here, seeking a medical professional. We want to diagnose, we want to begin treatment, and we want to just get that child support as soon as possible. The sooner you seek help, we'll say this again and again, the sooner you seek help, the better for the child. So putting it away or saying it's not, or denying it or saying it's not something that's a problem is only going to make the child have more difficulty in the future because that child is still growing every day. He's growing and he's learning. So either he's going to learn the things that are going to be helpful or he's going to learn damaging compensatory strategies. And then we as therapists have to undo all of this damage in order to teach that connection, that problem solving, that executive function, that language, all those things that are difficult for him or her. So it's really important to get help right away. You can do this in multiple ways. So you can seek help through insurance. So you can go through your pediatrician who recommends another doctor, and they'll be able to find therapy through insurance. Or you can go through a school if they're school age, and the schools will develop something called IEPs, Individualized Education Plans. Sorry, that's unfortunately not on here. I got that question a little bit later. So these IEPs consist of a team of people coming together, the school psychologist, the speech therapist, the occupational therapist, the teacher, and an administrator. They come and they do evaluations and they set goals for your child for that school year. And then the teachers and the therapists have to work towards whatever information is on the IEP. Your IEP meeting is the best time for you to get the services that your child needs, get all the goals written that your child needs, and make sure that everybody is on board for like the amount of time that your child needs. So getting 2 or 3 sessions a week, depending on difficulty, that is the time to demand more therapy or less therapy, whatever the case is for the child at the time. So those meetings are super important. Don't skip those meetings. I want you to be adamant when you ask for what you think your child needs. If they need an evaluation, demand an evaluation, the schools, at least the schools in the United States, will give services as the child needs. Insurance is a little bit different. If they are younger than school age, if they're early intervention between 0 and 3, this is something, again, you can go online and find the program and ask for an evaluation for speech and OT. If you suspect that your child has autism, they're going to need speech and OT. They might also need physical therapy, PT, because autism does come with a lot of motor difficulties. So if there's motor difficulty somewhere else in the body, a physical therapist will be able to assess and treat that. So ask for all 3 evaluations and see which services apply as you have the discussion with the professional. And for IEP meetings, at least in the state of New York, you are allowed a translator. So you are allowed that the meeting happens in a language that you understand and are comfortable with. And if they cannot find you a translator, they have to. So do not accept that you went and you didn't understand what was going on. They must provide you with a translator. Okay? So that's what you can do as a parent. And I also want to make a note, and here's where sometimes parents might misunderstand me, and I ask you that you please don't, and I want you to listen to me. Behavioral intervention, and what I mean by that is discipline. If we approach autism purely in a behavioral intervention way, in trying to reduce the spinning or stop the jumping or make him or her sit down or make them look at you, if we only focus on those things, then those are the things that will improve from the outside. We want to look into why the child is having difficulty. Like, how do we bridge the connection between what I am trying to communicate with you and what you are trying to communicate with me? So what that looks like sometimes is that we get on the floor with them and we play whatever they want to play, and we share in happy moments together in order for them to trust us, in order for them to enjoy the interaction and to learn how to reach out to us when they need something. And from that place of needing something, we can work towards just enjoying companies, enjoying that social interaction. If we can establish that, then we can shape language and motor planning and everything else that comes with it. But if we just work towards stopping behaviors or changing behaviors, then that creates a very damaging and inefficient way to interact with this child. It is a very tough thing that I'm asking, but I have seen it both ways. I have seen the child do behavioral therapy or a behavioral style of therapy, and for them to not be able to create that connection yet. It takes a little bit longer for them to do that. So we cannot take away autism by discipline. So I want us all to understand that and have that in mind when we see a child with such difficulties. So let's go to our servants. We struggle too. So what can I as a servant do? I ask you to change your framework, your perspective. in understanding this child. This child fundamentally needs help. They are the most vulnerable population that we serve. The child is not trying to make you angry. He's not trying to defy your rules, or he's not trying to make you look bad. He is struggling. He is having trouble understanding everything around him. It is effortful for him to look around his environment and understand what is going on, depending on the severity of the condition. There are some things that are good. There are some things that are good and some things that are, difficult. He's struggling to learn about the world. He's struggling to be himself, and he's struggling to find people to help him. He is constantly overwhelmed, constantly anxious, and he needs help desperately. So the first thing that we can do is really to be patient. So the child got up and ran in the Sunday school classroom for the 100th time. Help him to sit down for the 101st. This is really tough, and it takes a special kind of person, and there is a special place for those of you who can do this and do this well. I know that. So the child needs patience, they need kindness, and they need you to be willing to try new things to help the child and to help the family. Sometimes that just might be listening to a crying mom. It's really tough being in her situation. Sometimes it's listening to the frustrated dad who might just wants something different for the child and is having trouble understanding him. Your service here is the most important. This family needs to remember that the church welcomes their child, that the church loves their child, and that this child is good the way that they are, and that Jesus came for this little one too. He came for me, he came for us, he came for that little one as well. So when we start to believe as servants that these are, human beings, and they are worthy of dignity, and they're worthy of respect and love, and that we need to be wary of that, because sometimes they're listening and they understand more of what we say, and we don't think that they understand anything. And so that becomes a problem, because their feelings might get hurt and they can't show you that their feelings are hurt, or they can't act like their feelings are hurt. They just take it. So the worst thing that we can do is, in this case, is kind of reject the child, or put the child in a different space, or isolate them, or let them do whatever they want, because they're difficult, or they're having difficulty in the situation. So I challenge you as the servant to take the lead on making sure that they're integrated, and they're answering the questions, and they're involved, even if their involvement is small, because everything to include them is really, really important to them and important to their families as well. So forgive my folly. Forgive me if I said something that was, offensive, or I just feel very strongly about this, and I urge you to look at them as helpless children, and think about things just a little bit differently, so that we may come together as a community. I'll come back to this question. Oh, pardon me. So what can you do in the classroom? So you might recognize this slide from my last talk, and it's the same kind of things. It's the same kind of things about thinking about what the child is hearing and understanding, and how do I get them to participate based on what I learned about what this child's ability is. So offering them support in the classroom, if you have a co-servant and they are able to stand with the child or sit with the child and help them participate and model good behavior, or model participation, model raising their hand, or model, holding whatever it is you're teaching, or whatever the demonstration is, or or watching that video, modeling that next to them and joining them and talking with them and explaining things to them, that might be an effective strategy. Do I need to present things in like a physical way or a musical way, or like do they need to touch something, or do they need to be in a quieter space, or do they need something a little bit more colorful to engage with? Or, if you have a professional, of any kind, that you can ask these questions to, like, how do I adjust my presentation, or how do I help them in the moment? This is a very good a resource in order to be able to help that child in that classroom. I do have here some pictures of sensory tools that are just they may or may not help the child feel more comfortable or be more exciting for them. It's not really an easy way out, like a fidget for a child perhaps with ADHD, but it is something that might help regulate them. So maybe watching the glitter fall through something might help slow down their visual processing. Or most of these offer tactile support, so maybe that input might help them like be able to regulate their system a little bit better. It's not a click of a button that creates a child who's like learning right away, but it is a tool that you might want to try if it's not too distracting. And I do want to emphasize the word tool, that it's something to help, not something as a reward, because that gets to be a little bit confusing. So if the child's focusing on, let's say, the little the pop beads or the little slinky here, if he's focused just on that, taking it away might not make things better, it might make things worse. So being able to manage that as well. So trying and seeing, did it help him kind of like sit and focus, or answer questions, or be participating, or did it kind of distract him too much and maybe we should try something else? So I do want to answer some of your questions here. What are the most effective early intervention strategies for children with autism? That is a wonderful question. The most effective strategy, or I don't want to say the most effective strategy, but the effective strategies that I see in my practice are ones that follow that connection, that relationship-based approach that we talked about, that creating or pulling the motivation from within the child, or enticing the child to engage with you and share those happy moments or those exciting moments together, sharing a laugh, and not creating, for example, like an eye contact goal for the sake of eye contact, but communicative eye contact. So the eye contact that will say hello, or the eye contact that'll say, did you see that? That was really funny. Or or like, look, this is so cool. So those kind of thoughts before they have language attached to them, those are the kinds of interactions that we want. So often it's joining the child in their play, and if the ball goes in the cup and then goes out of the cup and then goes in the cup 100 times, then him and I are doing the same thing 100 times. And in that way, you imitating the little one, early intervention here is ages 0 to 3, your imitation of him or her might engage him or her to you, to pay attention to you. And so maybe on the 101st time, we put the ball in the cup and he looks up at you and smiles. Well, now I've added, put the ball in the cup, look up, smile. I've added more steps. So it does get to be very technical of how we do it, and it is small steps. But I would say the first thing that you can do is sit with them to play, however they want to play. Imitate them, as whatever they do, imitate them, and see how much you can get them to imitate you. I'd say that's the first thing that you can kind of do at home, and then just see what your speech therapist is working on, and try to expand with that. In other words, how can we ask for help? So I mentioned the IEP process, and in schools you can ask for help. You can ask for referrals from your pediatrician. I'm looking. I think I answered all of these. So I did want to give you here this last page with our question. I would like for you all please to scan this QR code so that you can submit your answer, so we kind of know that you're here with us and that you've been following along. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to go ahead and send them through, and I'll do my best to answer. I'm refreshing my page here. But there we go. There's the question on the screen. And if you have any more concerns, please go ahead and send them. We hope you'll join us again next week, where we'll be discussing facing the challenges of social media. And I want to remind you that we only have just a couple more meetings left before our series is over. So I did want to thank you for joining us here. Thank you for participating with your questions, and thank you for attending to what we have to say. God bless your service, and pray for us all collectively. Thank you so much.